to enable innovative material solutions for urban challenges. With many sponsors, Penn Global, National Science Foundation, A&R, Solve, Penn Engineering, Penn Arts and Science. The partners that are involved with today's symposium are listed on the bottom. I'm not going to go over them, so you can take a look at that. But I just want to kind of go over what today's going to encompass. We're going to have a symposium that has 3 parts. There's going to be some active participation on your part that I'll get to in a minute. First part is going to be to learn about urban challenges this morning. The keynote speaker this afternoon will talk about adaptation and adoption. And then this afternoon, the last part is a panel discussion where we try to integrate some of the thoughts about urban challenges and maybe some technologies. To give you some context, this is the 5th meeting we've had on React at Penn, which is the NSF-sponsored center. And this aims to bring together a team of international scientists to collaborate on active coding technology that collect, purify water, prevent the transmission of infectious disease, and collect and store energy. Those are the 3 research efforts that go on under React. In addition to our long-standing partners from Giants, so Giant is Grenoble Innovation in Advanced New Technologies. Last year, we added new partners from Sangwon University in South Korea. So today's event's even more ambitious. We're bringing together new collaborators, new partners, and see what comes out of this. Today's event, besides being ambitious, the representatives are here to represent Philadelphia, Grenoble, and Seoul, and particularly those involved with urban challenges involving the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the energy we consume. So we want to learn about these challenges from an urban perspective. And then tomorrow we're actually having a research retreat where we say, what did we learn today that we could then connect with what we're doing in the laboratory? And that's an important handoff that we are trying to achieve. Okay, so what are we asking you to do? So this is a participatory symposium. If you don't have an index card, please pick up an index card or we'll pass them around. And we're asking you to do 3 things. First, during today's presentations, can you identify some urban challenges related to air, water, and energy? And if applicable, connect it to climate change currently or how climate change is amplifying this problem. It could be a problem of personal interest, or it could be a problem that you hear about today that touches your interest. So let me give you an example, a simple example we're all familiar with. Consider the surge of drivers and people like me, bicyclists, potholes, right? With increasing changes in temperature, the freeze-thaw cycle is going to increase, obviously. We're going to get more potholes. We've got bigger potholes, right? And I think our friends from the city of Philadelphia know this pretty well. This impacts transportation, local economy, insurance claims, government resources, certainly energy efficiency. So in addition to identifying this problem, what we want you to do is propose an engineering solution or a materials-directed solution that either improves upon current technologies or displaces current technologies. So for the pothole example, those of you working with Xu Yang, she's invented a new adhesive, right? Maybe that adhesive could be added to the formulation for potholes. We haven't thought about that yet. So that's kind of the thinking that we want to kind of facilitate today, right? And then the third part is, can you identify expertise that we need to bring to bear to solve these problems? And be as specific as possible. It could be people, it could be centers, it could be foundations, those like that. So we'll ask you to identify 3 things on the note card throughout the day, and we'll have a box in the back to collect them. Identify problems, propose solutions, and the proposed expertise that we can bring to bear. So what we're going to do then is take these cards and use them as a public synopsis of today's symposium. That's number 1. So Kristen needs to support why we're getting funding from Penn Global and other places, and that's one of our report outs. And then second, we're having a researchers retreat tomorrow. We're going to use these themes in 3 buckets, air, water, and energy, to direct tomorrow's discussions. So with that, I'd like to hand off to Mark Allen Hughes. Mark was last year's keynote speaker. He's the director of the Climate Center. And if you were here last year, he gave a very passionate and very convincing talk using quantitative evidence of climate change and showed interesting projections depending on policies that are currently being proposed. So with that, Mark.
Thank you, Ross. So speaking for 2 or 3 minutes is going to be the hardest thing I'll do all month. I was hoping I was going to be able to steal my colleague Susan Watkins 2 or 3 minutes, but you know, I should have known better. I've known her for 40 years. She's rarely early, but she's never late. So I'm stuck with just my 3 minutes. So I just want to very briefly welcome you all to Penn and kind of express, again, with maybe a little less passion than last year, my enthusiasm for exactly the purposes of this REACT group and its annual symposia and all of the work it does throughout the year. I am actually a Penn-trained economic geographer who teaches in the School of Design, the Weitzman School here at Penn. But also really now my full-time day job, my slightly more than full-time day job, is directing the Climate Center for Energy Policy here at Penn. And part of our renewal gift last year that endowed the center was a commitment from College Hall, from the president and the provost, to provide us with 3 or 4 new chairs to recruit world-class faculty to the university. And really, that is as much as anything else, in addition to being a stated commitment towards an existential crisis that we all face. Even more than that in some ways, and certainly more parochially than that, it was recognition that Penn needs to raise its visibility and impact on the policy side of the energy issue, frankly, in order to better match the science and technology that we already have on this campus, and to create that entire array. And Penn, I'm going to close with this, Penn is really the ideal place for this kind of transdisciplinary research. I like to cite, some say I like to appropriate, Penn's first energy scholar, yes, Benjamin Franklin. Can't really, this is 10 minutes into a Penn event before the first mention of Ben Franklin, so that's shocking in itself. So Ben discovers electricity, or at least its polarity. He invents the lightning rod and commercializes it to great success. And he organizes the first North American fire insurance company, right? Penn integrating knowledge across science, technology, and policy on what has now become the world's most critical issue. So in that great tradition, I think REACT is really leading us to where we need to go. We're looking forward to more work, looking forward to this day, and learning all I can. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to Susan.
I saw that gleam in my friend's Mark's eyes, so I knew he was going to say something like that. It's our great pleasure, our Penn Institute for Urban Research, to be part of this convening. The Institute is a cross-university enterprise, but more important than being cross-university, its goal is to have impact for building sustainable and inclusive cities. And the way we're going to have that impact is just like this, bringing together those who are doing the innovation, where the rubber meets the road, but now it's not going to be rubber, it's something much more tailored to our issues, doing good work, for actual change, better future through actual implementation of solutions. But that can't stand on its own. Those solutions have to be in an interactive way, co-designed with the implementers. So the real DNA of our institute is learning from the doers, learning from the Ann Fedulins, who hopefully is here or will be here shortly, and Kyung-Won Kim, who is the head cabinet level previously a leader at Korea's housing and urban development. They will be able to help make the vision adoptable and implementable. And then we at Penn can do what we are all so good at doing, the best research. And together, that research will have impact. So thank you for inviting us to join with you in this enterprise. And we look forward to today's work and the ongoing work that comes out of it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here for this important forum, and I'm really excited about the special opportunity on my part because I'm an economist by training. I was involved in policy advising and briefly implementing policies for the government of Korea. I look forward to very informative exchange of views today, but I do hope that I have something to contribute which you'll find relevant. I entitled my talk, Smart Technologies for Urban Management, the Case of Korea. My presentation is organized in 4 parts. I'll introduce urbanization trend in Korea briefly, and then go to the concepts and technologies used in smart cities for urban management. And then I'll talk about Korean government policies towards smart cities, together with some examples. And then third section is the main part, where I'll introduce some specific examples of technologies being used in Seoul and some other cities to improve urban management in the area of transport, waste management, and water management. And then I conclude with some takeaways from Korean experiences, highlighting the importance of considering constraints. As you probably know, Korea has emerged from a very poor agricultural economy back in 1960 to a major industrial power within the half a century. And in 1960, only 27% of Korean population lived in cities. And 63% of the labor force were in the primary industry, being predominantly agriculture and then fishery. And the contribution of the primary sector to the GDP was 39%. Now, by 2010, urbanization rate reached 82%, and the share of employment in the private sector was dropped to 6%, and their GDP contribution is only 2.5%. So it's a dramatic transformation of the economy over the 50-year period, and in real terms, the per capita GDP increased by more than 20-fold. This is a graph that I borrowed from Paul Runge, Nobel laureate of 2018, who happens to be a champion of orderly urbanization as a driver for economic development. This shows a clear positive correlation between the level of urbanization and the level of economic development. And it traces the path that some of the countries has followed over the years. And you can see that Korea started from the bottom and the pack, low level of income and low level of urbanization, and then grew steadily to reach where we are now. With this background, get to smart cities. By now, smart city has become almost a jargon, just like sustainability. Everybody knows what it is, but different people have different thoughts about smart cities. There are over 200 definitions according to a survey paper. But the most important part is that a smart city applies ICT and green technologies to the delivery of urban services in various areas to improve the quality of life of its residents and also make the cities a better place to live in and work in. There is an analogy between the relationship between a 2G phone and a smartphone on the one hand, and the relationship between a conventional city and a smart city on the other. So if you think about a 2G phone, which we barely remember now, manufacturer of the telephone also manufactured softwares, applications. And these were to be used only amongst the closed circuit of the customers who use the same devices. Now in smartphone, there are manufacturers of phones, but there are many individuals and business firms that create these applications that are made available, some for free and for price, So the smartphone provides a platform, okay? And just like this, conventional city infrastructure is provided by the public sector almost exclusively. But in the smart city, in addition to the infrastructure provided by the public sector, but jointly with the private sector, and also many other organizations participate in providing various urban services. So smart city is also a platform, just as a smartphone provides a platform. There are different ways to present the various ingredients of a smart city. This is a famous graph from Frost and Sullivan Consulting Company, which is entitled "Smart Diamonds of Smart City." So it looks like a diamond, and you can see the relationship between different components of the city, ranging from smart energy, smart infrastructure, all the way to smart citizens and smart governance. Okay, we need to be mindful of what we want to do with technologies and smart cities in general. A recent report, McKinsey Global International, says becoming a smart city is not a goal, but a means to an end. And technology is simply a tool. And the smart cities need to focus on improving the outcomes for residents and enlisting their active participation in shaping the places they call home. And the new urban agenda, which was adopted by the UN conference called Habitat 3, which was held in 2016, had a paragraph whereby it said, we commit to adopt a smart city approach. And what this is supposed to do is to help improve their service delivery and also incentivize the inhabitants to make more environmentally friendly choices. Okay? Incidentally, Korea contributed to this particular paragraph in the negotiation of the document. Okay, there are about 150 cities around the world that have an official smart city strategy according to Smart City Strategy Initiative report. And the market for global smart cities is supposed to increase at an impressive rate of 18–19% per annum between now and the year 2025, when the market size is expected to reach about 1.5 trillion or 1.7 trillion. Of course, we cannot establish the accuracy of the estimate projection, but it's going to be a big market. More than that, smart city applications will have a substantial impact on various aspects of the quality of life, between 10 to 3% to quantify them. So again, this comes from the same McKinsey report. You can see the examples of contribution. Korea was the first country to embrace the concept of smart cities. And this was because Korea had a well-developed ICT industry. And they wanted to apply this to a unique expertise it has, namely the experience of new land developments on a large scale. So Korea legislated the Ubiquitous City Construction Act. Ubiquity was the name for what has now become a smart city in the Korean context. And the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, and Transport, for which I served as Vice Minister for a couple of years, selected smart cities as one of the 7 new growth engines for the economy, alongside with autonomous vehicles, drones, geospatial information, zero-energy buildings, desalination of seawater, and so on. And then the government adopted a national research and development project to build an urban data hub that will collect, connect, manage, and integrate various urban data for prediction of different urban events. And then the last law that I directed was to replace the U-City Construction Act by a Smart City Act. The importance of this law is that the scope was now expanded to include existing cities, not just new developed cities. And then under this current government, they created the Presidential Committee on the Fourth Industrial Revolution as an intergovernmental coordinating body, and Smart City Subcommittee was created within that umbrella. And this is a schematic diagram of Smart City platform in Korea. Again, there is a platform here which is operated through integrated control center, which monitors real-time what's happening in the city in various aspects and shared information with the residents through various media, and then also respond to events like fire, traffic accidents, crime scenes, and disaster coming in. And by sharing this information amongst different government units so that they can respond properly to the situations that are taking place. This Urban Integrated Control Center grew out of a research project under the Ubiquitous City Initiative, and then it became a pilot project, and then now it's up and running in 49 cities in its entirety, but in a simpler form virtually everywhere, in every city in the country. It's meant to connect services along the lines that I just described, but it goes beyond government units. So it's a means to break silo mentality. And also it generates big data that is needed for the prediction of the future, which will enhance the quality of urban services. And pilot projects produce very positive results. Crime rates are down by 62%, and there are other gains. So emergency response cases also increase substantially. There are some other examples, especially in the area of smart mobility. We have one pass card, which can be used for buses, subways, and other trains. And that can be used anywhere in the country, virtually anywhere in the country. And we have bus information system, which is provided to smartphones, but also offline signboard. And we have bus rapid transit in newly developed cities. And finally, zero energy homes in the context of global warming. We wanted to experiment this passive houses, and also they generate some energy of their own. So, these have been tested on the pilot scale. Hopefully, this will be propagated to a larger number of communities going forward. And what I don't mention here on this regarding climate change context is we mandated every city to assess vulnerability to disasters due to climate change when they make plans for development, long-term development plans. And if they identify problems, they needed to address them before the plan can be approved. Okay, as I said, Korea has unique experience and expertise in new town development starting from 1980s, combining housing development with the provision of quality infrastructure. But these new towns have served as a testbed for new technologies and new design schemes over the years, and currently government is implementing the National Smart City projects in Sejong, which is a new administrative city, and Busan, a part of Busan, with living labs. Because vast majority of population lives in existing cities as opposed to newly developed cities, it's important to make existing cities smarter. So we have R&D national project to develop smart city data hub models to help find urban solutions in the existing cities as well. And Korea is rapidly aging society. Now the percentage of population of 65 years of age or older is almost 15%. And the fertility rate is down to 0.98 as a nation, but it's whopping 0.69 for the city of Seoul. So the population is bound to decrease over the years. Single-member households represent about 30% of all households. So this means, together with a slowdown of growth potential, some central cities are losing population and jobs. And we need to rehabilitate these cities. So the government legislated a special act on urban regeneration in 2013 and started some pilot projects. And now the current government is scaling them up and has made a priority national project. And urban generation attempts accommodate some of the new technologies. Okay, Korea has pretty well-developed smart city-related industries and the energy, smart grid, energy storage system, and so on. We have desalinization technology pretty advanced. And transport, I mentioned. Water, we have smart grid, leakage detection. We'll talk about it. Where does Seoul stand as a smart city vis-a-vis other cities? McKinsey Global Institute took a survey of 50 cities around the world in several categories, and Seoul came up as a top performer, especially in the area of technology base and deployment of applications. But interestingly, awareness, usage, and satisfaction score wasn't good. So this is something I think we all need to be concerned about because, again, as I mentioned, the reason that we want to apply smarter technologies is to improve the quality of life, and if the people don't feel it, that's a problem. Okay, but the most important conclusion of this comparative study by McKinsey is that all cities have more upside potential. The maximum possible score was 110 points, but the top performers scored something between 65 and 70 points, which means there's a large room for improvement, even for the best performing cities. Okay, so let me go to some specific examples applied in Seoul and other Korean cities in these three areas. In the case of transportation, Seoul has a very, very sophisticated public transit system. If you have visited it, it's cheap, safe, and reliable. And TOPIS, which is Transport Operation and Information System, provides real-time information on the locations, travel times, and intervals of public buses and subway trains. These information shared to the citizens so that they can make better trip decisions. I already mentioned one pass card, but what's important is that all the fares are integrated. So you can make a transit, and the combined fare will be charged. Night out bus service is a recent innovation. Public transportation stops servicing at midnight and resume 5 in the morning. So in between, Seoul is a 24-hour city, working around the clock. So we needed some transportation in between. The Seoul city came up with the idea of night owl bus service. Now they have 9 routes. And when the routes were determined, they used the big data of 1 billion telephone calls and the arrivals and departures of taxis in different locations. So this is a TOPIS in action. You can trace every bus in the city, and if a bus runs into trouble and there is some impediment ahead of a bus, then the driver will be informed so that he or she will make adjustment. Likewise, the bus driver can report back to the center for help. This is night owl bus. Okay, waste management. We have a pricing system which is based on the quantity of discharge of waste, and we have a digital tracking system and waste collection and treatment facilities that I will briefly mention. There is an automated garbage collection system which is well publicized. This was first introduced in 1999, and it was applied to the city level in Songdo New Town, which is very close to the Incheon International Airport. But it has become a default in all new developments implemented by LH, which stands for Land and Housing Corporation, which is a state enterprise in charge of land and housing, public housing development. And under this system, domestic trash is sucked in by pneumatic tubes to a location, underground waste facility, and then sorted out, recycled, or burned for energy generation at a small scale. The good thing is that you don't need garbage trucks cruising around in the streets. They had initially some trouble because if you have one tube, you get food waste and other domestic waste. You need to switch from collecting food waste to collecting domestic waste. I mean, if you have two tubes, that's not a problem. But there is some coordination issue, but I think the system is now more stable. An improved version of this automatic collection and treatment system for food waste is underway at the pilot project, which is completed. The idea is instead of sending food waste to somewhere for treatment, why don't we send it over to the basement of the same apartment building and sort it out and treat it. And in fact, the byproduct of that, some fertilizer can be used to grow plants within the same apartment compound. And it has been pilot tested. This is the way automatic collection high rate composting system works. And you use a food waste grinder, and then it sends to the basement, and then it is water is removed and then it's treated here. Now, as you can see, the space is not very huge. You need two parking slots to accommodate this facility. So it's not really a big problem. However, before it can be applied to a large number of cities, a few things need to be resolved. First of all, this has been a pilot project, and this was done with the permit of the Ministry of Environment, which handles waste management at the national level. It cannot be done for a large-scale development exceeding 1,000 units. So this needs to be changed, and the food waste disposal is highly regulated in Korea. So, I mean, I don't want to go into details, but it's very difficult to use a legitimate disposer. So this also needs to be addressed, but the technology is there. Finally, water management. We have IoT-based smart metering system, leakage detection and control technique, water quality monitoring using drones now, and there is a pilot project in progress to create a virtual water system using digital twin technology. This is water supply system of Seoul. The supply of source water is handled by the state enterprise called K-Water. which constructs and manage water resources facilities. And then it's up to the local government to take the water and treat it and serve households and business premises. This is an interesting case of leak management improvement story of Seoul City. This RWR stands for revenue to water ratio. In many cities around the world, both in advanced countries and developed countries, a lot of water is lost and unaccounted for. And that one of the reasons is the leakage. So City started fixing this problem back in the late 1980s. And they were able to lower the annual cases of leaks from nearly 60,000 to 10,000. And as a result of that, the revenue water ratio rose from 55% to 95%, but now it's 97%, which is only comparable to Tokyo in the whole world. I don't want to go into details, but if you're interested, I can refer you to more details. Basically, they have the small blocks of water areas, district metered area. They have 2,000 or more, and they went into every block to fix it. The technology itself is not really sophisticated. It's a acoustic noise detection technique, but they've done it in a strategic way over the long time. Another reason for the improvement in RWR ratio was replacement of old pipes. And this started back in 1984, and it's nearly complete. It will be completed by the first half, by the end of June this year. And as you can see, that certainly contributed. And now the government just announced to propagate this pilot program of smart water system, which is ICT-based water quality monitoring and information sharing, and smart metering and so on. The ministry supports this initiative by paying for 50 to 70% of the cost to be borne by local government. And this is a sort of personalized services like this. People visit individual homes and just ensure that their water is safe to drink. And also if there's a problem, they fix it, clean the pipes and so on. Okay. What do we take away from our experiences? I think the first thing is you need to make it clear what you want to do and what you expect to deliver, so that citizens would understand what's forthcoming. Secondly, you have to engage local governments as well as the private sector, especially in the area of operation, maintenance, and upgrading of solutions to be sustainable. And information needs to be shared with citizens using various media. And we have to make sure that it's inclusive in the sense that everybody benefits something from smarter technologies. And implementing new solutions, we have to be opportunistic and flexible. We need to consider needs and constraints and make right choices. Now, there are many constraints, technological. You do research at lab scale and then do a pilot and then to full scale, a different game. Management capacity is really important to operate, maintain, upgrade once it is done, installed. And you need to consider the cost of service to be in line with willingness and ability to pay by the users. And you have to consider not just the one-off capital costs, but also recurrent costs for operation and management. Regulatory, it's a big issue because oftentimes laws and regulations fall behind technological innovation, but it's not good enough to complain. You need to work with the relevant players to convince them this is a good thing to do, which is very difficult. And there's an issue of striking a delicate balance between privacy and cybersecurity. And there is an issue of interest groups, because Ubers versus traditional taxi industry, there are many examples similar. And finally, social. Consumer awareness, perception, and use experience is extremely important. The quality of Seoul tap water is extremely good, but very few people drink tap water, right? They understand it's a good quality water, but somehow they are reluctant. And we finally need to address the concerns of the underserved. I strongly recommend this movie if you haven't seen it. It's a British movie called I, Daniel Blake, which sort of presents the frustrating case of an old person who had a medical problem and had to go through all the red tape, not having access to internet in his entire life. And this tells us that we need to understand there are people, low income or too old, and not tech savvy, so they can fall behind from smart technology, and we shouldn't let them behind. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Kim. I'm sorry, the biographical sketches of all three speakers are on the back table, so we don't want to spend a lot of time introducing speakers. But currently, Professor Kim is Professor of Economics at Sorbonne University. So now we'd like to have 10 minutes of questions for Professor Kim. And if you could answer questions from the audience for 10 minutes or less, we'll be done. So are there questions?
I was pleased to see comments regarding privacy and security there.
Yeah.
It seems like, as I listened to the first portion of the talk, that was a recurrent theme in my head was with all of this data who controls and knows who's doing what.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you have any comments on how that's being handled?
The privacy issue?
Yeah.
Okay. There has been very heated debate over three laws governing the protection of privacy of data being collected by different parties. On the one hand, the industries want open access to this data because the potential for the industry application is huge. And there was also a concern about encroaching privacy by civic organizations and many other individuals. But somehow they passed this law. And there's a very tight monitoring of this privacy of the data. But some data can be made anonymous and can be provided for research and commercial purposes. But one thing I wanted to say about this is that in the case of water metering, smart metering, one benefit is that, again, with a rapidly aging population, we don't know, some old people, how well they are doing in terms of health. And there are a lot of old people living by themselves. So by the smart monitoring, you can detect any singular situations in a particular house, and then can you follow up on the case whether the old person is doing all right. So that's an application. But I don't think there is a single rule for this delicate balance.
Other questions? And what about behavior?
Yeah.
Behavioral science, more question. What is being done to have people adapt to the new sustainability measures in Korea? There are behavioral changes that are going on that are being supported by the government, or how do you handle that?
If you refer to this Sustainable Development Goals, these are incorporated into various plans and policies, and Korea is committed to reducing global climate gas emissions. In terms of behavior, I tend to believe that the environmental quality is a luxury good in the sense that people start caring about the environment only when they reach a certain level of development. So if you're really poor, you don't care about the environment. I think Korea has gone past that stage quite some time ago, and people care about the environment. And we have, I think, we do waste recycling, I think, one of the best places, most sophisticated. Plus, more and more business firms think that it's good to be environment friendly. And there are some incentives for more environmentally friendly devices. But I think there is growing awareness of this issue. Yeah.
Thank you for your wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Do you have anyone in Korea who's sounding the alarm about the connection between IoT and cyber attacks? It poses a massive risk, and you
Yeah.
just don't hear enough about it. That's number one. And number two, do you have any non-governmental oversight of your integrated control center?
About the first question, I mean, there are incidences of hacking, and it's a sensitive issue, even more sensitive issue in Korea because we face potential threat from the north and other issues. But I think it's handled by case. But when a breachment of this security happens, there's a thorough investigation, especially if it involves financial system. It's taken very seriously and responded to. Your second question about the engagement of the non-governmental sector in monitoring this system, I think we have the law which allows people to request for the release of information in general, and the mayor of Seoul is a sort of sophisticated politician, and he makes sure that it shares a lot of information with the citizens real time. He has a huge signboard in his office, and obviously it's connected to many other places. So I think there are awesome efforts to, yeah. Yes.
So, I mean, we're at an academic institution, so a lot of the times when we're talking about things like cybersecurity or sustainability, we're talking about it at the academic level to other academics. And I was wondering if South Korea in general had been starting, public programs or really targeting education at like the elementary school, middle school, high school level.
Yeah.
If those programs have had any success in getting people to adopt sustainability, because I think a problem we have, at least in the States, is that we're all talking to each other up here.
Yeah.
We don't have that trickle down.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very important and relevant point. Now, I don't know, 3 or 4 year kids start using smartphones, and they exchange a lot of information without knowing what they're doing. And there are many cases involving the encroachment in privacy and so on. So we have a lot of campaigning activities going on to sort of discourage people from doing it, and to make sure that they understand they are liable to serious criminal charges for doing this. But it will take a lot of time and efforts to educate people, the etiquette and the cyberspace. I think it's a public good. We need good policy infrastructure, but also, the level of, awareness by the citizens needs to be raised even further. That's all I can say.
Any closing questions? Ready?
So, with all the digitalization that you're describing, there are a lot of communications that are done, a lot of computers working in the background. You need to power them, you need to cool them down. So what's the carbon footprint of all this calculation that is done in the background? How does it compare to what you earn, for example, for building control?
That's a $6 million research question. I'm not. No, I'm not sure about that, but I appreciate your point that we need to take a more general equilibrium perspective, and you are saving energy by employing smart technology in one place, but you're using up energy to get the system going. But my hunch is the overall benefits outweighs the extra energy cost, but I don't know how big one is relative to the other, but that's something that I'll look into. Thank you.
Any other questions to close? Last question, Josh. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think the question of the aging population is
Mhm.
increasingly relevant to the U.S. We'll probably learn a lot from Korea.
Right.
I'm curious, with the U.S. being a little bit more automobile-centric and losing the choice of mobility or being auto-dependent
Right.
rather than maybe car-optional lifestyles where you have other choices. Are there thoughts in terms of how you've targeted the older population and enabled their mobility in cities?
I think it's another very good point. As I said in the beginning, Korea has a very well-developed public transit system. And I personally, abstain from driving to school most of the time because it's very convenient and, reliable and even cheap. So there is, and for senior citizens, subways and buses are free. If you are 65 and over, you're free. I think the city is losing too much money for them doing this, so they're complaining either we have to raise the bar to 70 years of age, or the national government chip in some money to promote this important policy. That's one thing. And the other thing is to share trip schedule, right? Some people might not be able to use smartphone handy. So we have offline signboard in every bus station and every subway station, whereby you know when, what time, which line is coming. So that's another effort.
Thank you very much. So let's move on. We'll thank our speaker once again.
Thank you very much.
The next presentation is coming from Grenoble, France. I have to say at the outset, Francine is an old friend of REACT, and she's a PhD material scientist, and she'll be representing the government side of what's going on in Grenoble, so I want you to be aware of her pivoting in her background. But we were trying to get folks from Grenoble to come to represent the office, but there's an election going on apparently in Grenoble, and we couldn't get a government speaker, but we got a better one.
Thank you, Russ. So it's a pleasure for me to introduce the Grenoble-Alpes metropolis to you. And as you mentioned, I'm not an expert on urban planning management, so I do my best anyway to present you this oops, sorry, it's the situation in Grenoble. So, and the objective of this presentation, of course, is to provide an overview of Grenoble's action regarding energy, air, and water. I picked I tackled the problem, yes, considering my background, as I said, more technical. So, and coming up after Seoul, Grenoble is a small city compared to Seoul. So, please, this is a modest presentation. So I will introduce the Grenoble-Alpes metropolis in general, and then talk about the Grenoble-Alpes Air Energy Climate Plan that is the plan for the city of Grenoble, and it was created in 2005. So, and I will illustrate with example of action directly to energy saving, air quality, and water. And then I will focus on the Prescal Giant, which is a new neighborhood in Grenoble. Actually, this is the Grenoble Research and Innovation Campus, where all the experimentation of in terms of urban planning are made. So first of all, this nice picture of Grenoble with the center of the downtown of the city here with the red roofs, you see. On the west side of the city, you have the university campus, and on the east side, the Presqu'île, because we are, between two rivers, the Isère and the Drac, and this is where the giant campus and the innovation campus stands. So as you see, Grenoble is standing along three mountains called the Chartreuse, Vercors, and Beldon, and so it's Grenoble set in the valleys, in these three valleys. We have about 140,000 inhabitants in Grenoble. I mean, in the Greater Grenoble, in the metropolitan, and composed by 49 municipalities. So, by the way, Grenoble is situated here in France at 3 hours by train, fast train from Paris, and 1 hour and a half from Geneva, and close to the Côte d'Azur and Italy, etc. So Grenoble is a sustainable territory, and this region is multiplying initiatives in favor of good livings in terms of energy transition, urban nature, eco-mobility, air quality, health, agriculture, etc. Paradoxically, Grenoble is the flattest city in France. So number one in terms of commuting by bicycle or just walking, on foot walking. So just to give you a few rapid numbers, 90% of the waste collected is recovered. 80% of drinking water is natural and untreated. And half of the city buses run on natural gas. But I will explain this later. So this is a quick history to show you that history tied to disruptive innovation in Grenoble since the 18th century with different famous Grenoble persons. Even during Grenoble was the birthplace of the French Revolution, actually, and it is true. So they came from Grenoble up to Paris, to start the revolution. One of our big champions is Champollion, who decoded, the Egyptian hieroglyph when the Napoleon Egyptian campaign, during the Napoleon campaign. We have also a place, Vica, who is a company, still a company, where there was the invention of concrete. In terms of literature and music, it's the birthplace of Stendhal and Berlioz, for those who know them. Of course, we have a long tradition of also work on hydroelectricity and new energies, and also physics, nuclears, and electronics with the Nobel Prize winner. That was the former CEO of the CEA. Etc., and the Olympic Games in '68, of course. So this is a quick photos and patchwork to say that Grenoble-Alpes metropolitan is a leading urban ecosystem, and actually the innovation, there is a long tradition of cooperation between research, higher education, and industry, with 60,000 students and 25,000 researchers. 1 out of 5 inhabitants works in research, education, or industry. This is just to illustrate the industry leaders born in Grenoble, with, of course, our champion ST Microelectronics and Soitec too in the same fields. Schneider Electric, also, that was created in Grenoble. And also for those who knows or like ski, the Rossignol company for smart skis now. And so the Vica, the concrete, and maybe the Chartreuse for those who appreciate liqueurs. So, current environment state of Grenoble. In fact, Grenoble is known, unfortunately, for a lot of pollution, and so the emission every year. So there is an emission of 3.7 million of CO2 equivalent tons, which correspond to 8.2 million tons of CO2 per inhabitants per year, basically. Starting in 2005, after the creation of this plan, actually we are constating an energy consumption decrease, mainly due to industrial sectors. So there are opportunities also for decreasing the city environmental footprint, and they are numerous: housing, tertiary real estate, mobility, foods. It's, as you mentioned also, it's very important that all the stakeholders being mobilized on these questions. The city is exploring also options related to CO2 sequestrations. And again, the city strategy defined according to the anticipated impact of the climate change in the region Rhône-Alpes. So this is just a graph presenting the emissions of greenhouse gas in kilotons equivalent in function of times. And so I read, sorry, because it's kind of complicated, but by distributing the total allowed French carbon emission from the 2 degrees target scenario among all the cities, Grenoble metropolis remaining carbon emissions are estimated to 45,000 kilotons CO2 equivalent. Since currently the metropole carbon emissions are approximately 2,000 kilotons per year now in 2020. There are only 21 years, left before the carbon budget is fully exhausted. So, meaning that to meet this 2 degrees Celsius objective, Grenoble metropolis should reach the carbon neutrality by 2050 and compensate by an overall emission by the carbon sequestration. So this is what this curve basically represents. And meeting this objective, of course, of carbon neutrality by 2050 will require drastic break in current trends, only possible through behavior changes of all citizens and the city partners. So, based on this Grenoble Alps Air Energy Climate Plan was created, as I said, in 2005, and it was actually the very first air climate plan in France, which is now required to all French metropolis since 2012. It is an integrated strategic plan with ambitious action plan and financial perspective. All sectors, are concerned: energy, transport, waste, local food supply. And also, this is a story of everybody. And actually, in Grenoble, there are a lot of consultation between researchers, innovators, local authorities, energy user committees, etc. So it's a collective work that concerns all the city. So this slide is just to illustrate the 5 axes, of this plan, starting with adapt the territory to climate change. The investing in energy transition and air quality. Act 3 concerns the share and development of territories' resources. 4, involving all stakeholders, including the university, etc., and the citizens. Building an exemplary city also, because they have to give the example. And this implementation of this plan for the period 20 to 30 will require about 550 million euro in the long-term investment plan. So, objective for 2030 are decrease of energy consumption of 40%, increase of renewable energy of 35%, and a decrease of green gas 50%. We have additional constraints, but that's trajectory to 2050 with carbon neutrality. So let's start with some action in energy. So I'm presenting here, you know, the breakdown of energy consumption per sector in Grenoble. And as you can, sometimes the documentation were in French and I couldn't really translate everything, but basically buildings, including housings and service, you know, equipments and stores and offices, are number one energy consumers. With it represents 42% of the local energy consumption of Grenoble. One interesting number also is the energy consumption per resident, including housing and cars, 1,100 euro per resident per year on average. So, housing is a prime. So, action versus existing buildings was, in fact, the large-scale private housing building renovation campaign that happened between 2010 and now. So Murmure is the name of this program, offers optimized financial, technical and organizational support and works closely together with every stakeholders. And principally the technology was external envelope insulation of walls, roof and floors, with an illustration of this on a big building. So between 2010 and 2014, we performed 4,500 dwellings, renovation, and we target 10,000 by the end of this year. The cost for public authority represents 3.7 euros per inhabitant per year over this period. It's interesting. So we mentioned promoting renewable energy. Again, we'd like to emphasize locally produced, renewable and recovered energy. And in Grenoble, those target technologies are biomass energy, geothermal energy, and solar energy and electricity. So they created local funds that is called the Fonds Chaleur. And the coordination is also done by the metropolis of all these renewable energy promotion. So, concerning the solar electricity, we have two companies where the municipalities are also involved in the capital share, and this is Sparkosol for PV, a photovoltaic system on parking, and Citizenship for PV project. Another action was developing district heating distribution. So on the right-hand side, you have these district heating networks in red. You see here all around the city. This is the price scale. And this is actually the second biggest heating networks in France, with 170 kilometers of network. And it serves 40,000 housing, 100,000 inhabitants, and deliver 400 megawatt thermal in winter, especially. So this is a cogeneration electricity also generator, because we have 5 thermal generator units all around the city, and one on the Prescal giant campus at the CEA. But this one worked with fuel oil, and it was very soon substituted by the biomass generator, which will be working with wood. So, yes, and all of this network is managed by a public-private company called CCH. So, regarding air quality, like noise level and the constitution of urban heat island impact the quality of life and the health of the population. So it's very, very important to understand those phenomena and organize preventive action. So the Grenoble metropolis put a lot of effort on observation and anticipation of environmental risk factors in particular. They work on sensors, modeling, restitution platforms, They work also on population awareness, information. They make a lot of follow-up also of discussions. They do prevention and coaching. And also in terms of urban planning, they work on building intelligence modeling, city intelligence modeling as well. So, reducing greenhouse gas emission. This is a big challenge for Grenoble because, as I mentioned, it's heavily constrained by its geographic environment with the mountains and so the city that is constrained to be in the valley. So this led very early local policymakers to monitor and undertake very strong measures to improve the air quality. So this is unfortunately, the big news in Grenoble. And 2 years from now, during 11 days, there was a peak of pollution that was over the pollution alert threshold, and yet the threshold is higher than what is recommended by the health specialist. So, and transport actually is the second most important cause of greenhouse gas emission behind thermal energy and electricity production, and in France it's up to 38%, mostly because we have nuclear electricity as well. And 3/4 of the emissions due to transportation comes from trucks, buses, and private vehicles. So, the urban mobility plan with the objective of 2030, which is called the PDU, the ambition is so to gather 79 actions. It represents 2.2 billion euros investment to transform Grenoble's transportation system. And this concern develop new services, structuration of new connection and networks, develop new infrastructures, develop new services centered on customization, proximity, reactivity to facilitate combined use of car, bicycle, public transportation, and walking. So it's a combination of these. Facilitate the commuting and transfer and reduce the individual use of car. Accelerate the energy transition for vehicles. Develop carpooling, car sharing, optimize delivery transport. And I give you 5 examples. One is creation of a low emission zone for business logistic delivery. So you recognize more or less, the 3 valleys here. So this is all this zone. And this low emission zone represents basically 68% of industrial and business sites in Greater Grenoble. So, and the legislation on this low emission zone will impact 3/4 of gas emission. So it has a real direct impact of the improvement air quality in Grenoble. Second action was progressive ban of the most polluting vehicles in Grenoble, starting in 2017 up to 2020. We have stickers, we have to have stickers on our cars now, and starting in 2020, I noticed that my car, which is number 3, will no longer be accepted in Grenoble. So that was and the objective again to ban, diesel at the horizon of 2025. And this is primary obligatory, if you want, for business and for professional, but they created also support, for acquisition and rental of low-emission vehicles for professionals, so with a lot of financial aids. Another example of smart mobility in Grenoble is microsensors to monitor the air quality in Grenoble. So we have also application sensors everywhere in the city. So, and on the website, you can get all information of the condition of air quality in Grenoble in real time, basically. And there is also a Captotech, meaning a free monitor lending library where you can lend those captors and take it wherever you want to go and collect the data and share, if you want, with the community. So the idea is really to better, to increase the citizen awareness on everyday quality and environment. Finally, a little bit like in Seoul, but on a modest scale, I guess, we also have our application, where all traffic, connection, itinerary, for food, bicycle, public transportation, carpool, or a mix of it is explained. And you also have the quality of air from Atmo within this application. And I use it actually every day. So regarding the water aspect, I focus my attention on the tap water distribution. So where does the Grenoble tap water come from? Actually, from 127 springs on the metropolitan area. Sorry, this is the little dots, blue or green or red. And most of them are managed by the Grenoble metropolis and local public companies, and some of them are managed by private partner operators. And also we have 2 groundwater tables from the Drac and the Romanche here that provide also a lot of water for inhabitants. And basically volume of water of 40,000 cubic meters per day in average. Whereas the spring, are less productive, of course. So just water table, are those phreatic table that comes from glacier. Of course, we are in the mountain here, and so the water saturated sand here constitute this table. So here you have well, and this is a photo, of a well that is located somewhere in the area. It's very protected, of course, because nobody wants to switch, this area, so it's under security. And here is just an illustration of the analysis and the concentration of different elements in the water of Grenoble. And again, all these information are on our website, so you can always, get some information on this. More than 5,000 measurements are done per year by the regional health agency, and the continuous analysis, of course, is done by the local person, and available online. So basically, 76% of the drinking water is distributed without treatment. It's a natural water. So here is just to explain that since 2015, Grenoble is in charge of the integral water circle. From the protection of the resource, as I mentioned, the abstraction of the water, the treatment for the 24% of water coming from springs, so filtration, chlorination, and UV treatment. The distribution, we have about 2,000 kilometers of conduits, and sewage water treatments, of course. So now I'm going to make some focus on the price scale. As I mentioned before, this experimental land, where we try things. And so initially, historically, this price scale, under the name of Giant, the Innovation Campus, was dedicated to scientific research, basically. We invested a lot the past 10 years, to modernize R&D infrastructure and academic lab, scientific equipment and technological platforms, but it's also a land in mutation, with a lot of investment in infrastructures, tramway, housing, and public equipment. And it's becoming a new neighborhood of Grenoble, with some of the key figures here. It's basically, this is the Giant Innovation Campus that occupied the most of this territory. But we have a lot of projects on this. So here are just pictures of the scientific transformation that have brought 10,000 researchers on site and 10,000 students. The economic transformation with also the presence of the two most important private employers of the area, with ST Microelectronics and Schneider Electric, which is bringing a pilot of energy and sustainable building, but it's still confidential, so I can't tell anything about it yet. But basically, we have also 10,000 industry jobs on site. And the urban transformation with a chief architect, Christian de Posenparc, and a label EcoCity that guarantee attractivity and sustainable development on here. So we brought student housing, shops and service, family housing. Before, in 2008, we had only 300 inhabitants. We are now attaining 10,000 inhabitants. So one particularity of the Presqu'île is that all the old building and new building are connected to the geothermal energy network. So we get the water from the phreatic table underneath, and each building must be equipped with a geothermal energy system. This is required, and connection to exhaust water pumping network. So this is the originality of and the innovation, in one sense, of this Presqu'île, that all the exhaust water is conducted, through these networks to the river. So I mentioned that we had to reduce by 30% the energy consumption versus, so applicable to French thermal regulation. In fact, Grenoble has to, in average, make a 20% of reduction of energy consumption. Presqu'île imposes even a worse, rate. So it's a directive from the city. And actually, if you equipped also, your building with heat pump and with a very high efficiency, then you can even get a reduced consumption. Okay. Biomass, I mentioned it before, is the biomass power generator. This is the generator that is on the site of the CEA. It used to work with fuel, and it's no longer the case, so it's opening now. It's still under last phase constructions. It's a vapor generation of 40 megawatt. And so this will feed basically 220,000 dwellings within the district heating network. So it reintroduces, if you want, all the heat into this district heating network, and it produces also 10,000. It produces also electricity for 10,000 dwellings. And so, in terms of economy of CO2 equivalent tons, this represents an economy of 12,000 CO2 equivalent tons per year, introducing this biomass power generator that works with local wood. This is an illustration of this first ABC pilot in France for autonomous building for citizens. This is a strategic and emblematic project by the R&D of Bouygues Construction, which is a big company, a French company of construction. This concerns 62 apartments, and the objective is water and energy autonomy, basically, and optimization of waste management and reduction, as it was shown before, improvement of everyday life comfort. And the next slide gives you just an explication. Sorry, it's in French again, but basically, all the rainwaters are collected, filtered, reused, and treated, as well as the grey waters coming from different sources. And this represents 2/3 of a reduction of 2/3 of the district water consumption for the water. So solar energy, so the energy which is generated by the photovoltaic panels, is stored in batteries to supply electricity to the housing and heating system. Again, this gives up to 70% of energy autonomy of this building. We mentioned mobility, of course. Mobility management on the Presqu'île has adopted a multimodal approach, which is quite classic. So, as you mentioned, we also have, some with for example, my CA badge, I can run, drive an electric car. I can rent hybrid car in the city, and so with only one badge, you can have access to different services. Of course, so we work on multiple mobility solutions for easy access, convenient, and affordable price. The idea is really to have in the future, less and less people working by themselves in their car, and use different ways. So the tramway, of course, and car sharing, public transportation. And last but not least, this is our last project, City Cable Car, that will be delivered in 2023. This is actually an electric vehicle that runs upon the cable with active suspension. This will allow us to give access to one side of the river, to the other side of the two other rivers, actually. So this project will cross the two rivers and allow, the circulation, car circulation, to stop here at the entrance of the city. So it's going to be a big way also of decreasing the emission of carbon. So that's it, and I hope I responded to the questions, so providing some information about energy, air, and water. So thank you for your attention. And I want to thank also my colleagues from the Metro of Grenoble and the Presqu'île Giant. Thank you.
Questions for Francie?
It's a great talk. So I noticed near the end, it seems like a lot of the, especially geothermal and photovoltaic initiatives are being really thought out and implemented because of much of the new construction going on in the Presqu'île. But what about other existing parts of the city? I imagine it's harder to implement some of those technologies, but are there specific plans in place, whether implementing solar on residences or solar farms and stuff that are happening there as well?
Yes, in fact, I mentioned this before. There is a push, to install solar panels everywhere. So even some funding aids from the city or the region, actually. So now, if I decided to put some photovoltaic cells on my house, for example, I could receive some support. So yes, of course, there is for existing houses, and actually a lot of people are considering this type of energy-consuming solution. Yeah.
Other questions?
Yes.
Was interested in your sticker program?
Yeah.
The 543. I think it brings increased observability across the region in terms of what's the classification of these vehicles.
Yeah.
You mentioned Euro 3.
Yeah.
So you have to give up your address in 2020.
Yeah.
So in the U.S. we had a program, I think 10 years ago, it was called the Cash for Clunkers program.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get cash in advance by giving in your old inefficient vehicle.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious as to the equity dimensions. So I think for lower income populations, they may be able to afford a second-hand car,
Yes.
maybe more polluting.
Yes.
As you give up these cars, could it also help to transition those populations that can't afford the cleaner vehicle?
Yes, of course. And in fact, it's already the case. When you sell your very polluting area now, you can receive some support from the government and or local funds. It depends, because we have different local authorities, so you can also combine all these aids to pilot and diminish your price. So of course it depends on the revenue of the person, and so some can get more money for fundings than the other, and also priority is made on professionals right now. So it's very strong on them. So again, they receive also some supportive money for going through this transition. Yeah.
Any other questions? So if not, let's thank Francis.
Thank you.
So for the last speaker of the morning, before we break for lunch, we have someone close to home from the city of Philadelphia. Ann Fadulin is Director of Planning and Development. The bio, again, is in the handout. Please take a look at Ann's bio. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, good morning. So like the introduction, my name is Ann Fadulin. I'm Director of Planning and Development for the City of Philadelphia, and this is my PowerPoint. This is the whole thing right here. So if you were really looking forward to 60, 70 slides, sorry, this is the whole thing. I first want to, before I start, I just want to acknowledge the gentleman from South Korea and the woman from France, and say welcome to Philadelphia and the United States, and to say that it's very encouraging to have representatives from other countries who acknowledge that these issues are real and are really taking concrete efforts and attempts to really try to rectify them. And we really appreciate your leadership, your world leadership on these issues. And we hope at some point our country may be as prominent in these areas as well. So thank you. So I just want to say too that, when I get an invite to speak and it comes from Susan Wachter, my first sort of thing is always like, yeah, I should try to do it. And so this came up, and I looked at my schedule, and I said, my schedule's available, so yes, I'm going to do it. And then I sent it off to my communications director, and he sent it back to me, and he said, really? And I said, what? And he said, I think you should read what they are asking you to speak about. And so I did then take the time and read it and thought, okay, material science, obviously nobody saw my science grades when they asked me to speak at this, but thank goodness for the power of the internet and Google. And I think we've really figured out sort of how to bring this home and back to really what my area of expertise is, which is more planning and development. But there's a lot of work in this area that the city is actually doing. So thank you for having me and kind of hanging with me as we get through this. So in the area of what this is about, the city really has 4 key objectives that I want to talk about today. And then as sort of my usual MO, I may try to slide in a little 5th and a 6th that aren't exactly related, but are sort of things that I think we're interested in anyway. So the 4 key things are: we want to reduce our carbon emissions, we want clear air for all Philadelphians, we would like to reduce traffic deaths, and we want to eliminate the use of landfills and conventional incinerators. So what are we doing about these things, right? So Mayor Kenny has committed to reducing carbon emissions 80% by 2050 and to achieving 100% carbon-free electricity grid by 2050. So the things specifically we're doing about this is we've issued a municipal energy master plan that outlines efforts to cut city energy use by 20% and to move to 100% renewable electricity for city facilities by 2030. This includes a $23 million investment in energy efficiency in our 4 downtown office buildings. We call it the Triplex Plus One, and also the Philadelphia Museum of Art. We've also signed a power purchase agreement with a third-party developer to build a 70-megawatt solar facility that will provide 22% of the city's electricity. And we've installed solar panels at the Water Department's Southeast Water Pollution Control Plant. We've instituted a high-speed bus line on Roosevelt Boulevard in order to try to encourage folks to get out of their cars. And we're making buildings more efficient as part of our rebuild initiative. And for those who may not be familiar with rebuild, it's really about investing in our parks, our rec centers, and our libraries. But I think what's key about that is one of the things in the 2035 plan is we want to make open space accessible to every Philadelphian within a 10-minute or a half-a-mile walk. And rebuild is really a big step forward in trying to achieve that goal. We've also updated our building codes for all new commercial construction that will hopefully result in as much as a 30% reduction in energy use. We manage an energy benchmarking program that has led to a 5% reduction in energy usage in large private buildings. And we've recently passed legislation requiring all non-residential buildings over 50,000 square feet to achieve high-performance building certification or to perform a tune-up on their existing building systems every 5 years. We are also in an effort to try to bring that to residential buildings as well, but that's been a little bit trickier to figure out what is the easiest way to residents to really understand that, access that, and not necessarily impact on what we already see as a growing affordability issue. So these are some of the things the city is doing, but how can material sciences technology help in this regard? So I have a lot of questions because material science, again, is not my thing. So I don't have that many answers, but that's why we're here today, right? To find out from you guys and get you guys thinking about some things. So can conductive polymers be used to create organic solar cells that are less expensive, lighter, and customizable, and perhaps more useful in a densely built environment? And can material scientists find ways to overcome their inefficiency as compared to silicone-based devices? Can those organic solar cells be partnered with batteries that charge faster and hold that charge longer? And will no-loss conductors help us reduce our energy demand? Can aerogel improve insulation and support insulative glass? You know, and there's going to be kind of a general theme running through a lot of the things we're trying to do, and some of the things that I heard from Korea and France too is really this basic kind of behavioral change issue is how do we get people out of their cars, right? We're going to talk about reducing carbon emission and cleaner air, but a lot of it comes down to the fundamental piece of how do you get people out of their cars and to use a different method. So another big tenet is we want every Philadelphian to have clean air to breathe inside and outside. And what are we doing about that? The airport has upgraded its parking shuttle fleet from diesel buses to compressed natural gas vehicles. SEPTA, which is our regional transit system, has purchased 525 hybrid electric buses and 25 no-emission electric buses. The city, for our own fleet management, look, I told you that was our PowerPoint, and I touched something and bam. So the city has purchased hybrid vehicles, electric vehicles, and compressed natural gas vehicles as well, and we are continuing to do that, and we hope to be on a pace that we are really only using those type of vehicles in our fleet and getting away from fossil fuels. And then last week, we passed legislation phasing out the use of certain dirty fuel oils that contribute to air pollution. And many of you may have read about all what's going on with the 1,300-acre PES refinery site. And so there's probably continuing discussion going on about other legislation that the city could potentially pass to try to phase out or eliminate further use of certain dirty fuels. So again, questions for the material science crowd. Will graphene help support fuel cell powered cars? Can advances in electric cars and charging stations reduce the number of pollution emitting vehicles on our road? I mean, big rap against this is, well, I like to travel for more than 100 miles before I have to recharge my car. Research in 2018 identified low-cost and sustainable hybrid materials synthesized in part from solid waste that could possibly help reduce air pollution as an alternative to carbon. So there's a lot of really cool things you guys are always doing. And it's exactly this type of innovation from material sciences that we are depending on to help ensure that we will be able to breathe a little easier in the future. Again, one of our big goals is we want to reduce traffic-related deaths to 0 by 2030. 2030. So what we're doing is we're introducing speed cameras on Roosevelt Boulevard. You hear Roosevelt Boulevard a lot. As many of you may know, that's one of the most dangerous roadways in the country. Right, so we're really focused on how do we improve safety there. We've also created an interactive map where residents can support unsafe road or sidewalk conditions to us. And we've secured $13 million in funding for projects along high injury network corridors. And again, where do you guys fit in? You've already given us LED streetlights that are a key element in implementing our Vision Zero plan. You've also provided materials in road markings that impact the reflectability and durability of these safety features. Similar to airbags and backup cameras that are now standard in all vehicles, can we work together to mandate systems like pedestrian warning and automatic braking as standard in all vehicles? And while we know those systems are not yet perfected and actually have quite a way to go, you know, is there a way for material sciences to develop and perfect this emerging technology? And actually, it appears that you guys already are doing some work on that, as Waymo has recently announced that they've got a patent for technology that can soften the body of a car as it detects it's about to hit a pedestrian. Right? So if we can't get drivers to slow down, at least we can make our cars a little softer. So the other key thing is we want to eliminate the use of landfills and conventional incinerators for solid waste disposal by 2035. Again, what are we doing? We're supporting the development of community and small-scale composting systems to reduce the amount of food waste that even gets to landfills. We have a program where surplus government meals are donated for use by food insecure households instead of thrown away, using technology platforms to match city facilities that have surplus meals with food pantries that can distribute them. And we are supporting zero waste events where volunteers help divert the waste from landfills. In fact, our 2018 Philadelphia Marathon diverted nearly 90% of the waste generated by that event. We're collaborating with local businesses and organizations through the Zero Waste Partnership Program. And just this past December, Council passed and Mayor Kenny signed into legislation the plastic ban. So legislation banning plastic bags. Again, how does material science fit into this? Researchers at Penn, the Penn that shall not be named, Penn State, sorry. They're working on a battery that is both longer lasting and more recyclable than current batteries. And then how can technology help us track the flow of materials through the supply chain so that it can be incorporated in more circular modes of manufacturing rather than the linear make, take, and trash model we currently use? And I'm going to touch on that again in a minute. The City of Philadelphia recently launched a pitch and pilot program. This is through our Office of Information and Technology, where we invite people to come in and pitch innovative ideas to us, and then we provide some seed money. And we ask these exact kind of questions. And we're looking forward to getting responses from small startups and just innovative thinkers about how can we, as a city, better attack these issues. And you guys think of stuff that we can't imagine or that we might not be thinking of it. And so we really welcome and encourage your feedback. And then, so I thought those are our 4 key things, right? So I said on my slide in a 5th, right? And my area specialty is really development and construction in the built environment. And there are certain advancements in construction materials that are definitely helping us to address some of the construction issues we face, right? There's cross-laminated timber construction, which is more environmentally friendly than steel and concrete, could be more cost-effective, and may help us address some of our skilled labor shortages. We also know that material science led to the reduction in weight of concrete panels that really allowed for advancement in modular construction, and we're starting to see that used more in Philadelphia. And that has some advantages to us because it's less affected by weather, and it can lead to reduced construction time and therefore reduced costs, which we hope will make a dent in some of our affordability issues. One of the things that I talked about just a few seconds ago was really this sort of circular manufacturing process as well. which is how do we start thinking when we're building our built environment as to what is going to happen to that building after it's achieved its usable life, right? So I happen to live in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. My house is over 200 years old, right? It was really built, it's built of mica schist, so it's like stones that are like this. It's not going anywhere, right? But recently there was something that appeared in some publication that talked about Walmart. When it builds its big box retail stores, they're looking for a 10 to 15 year lifespan for that building, right? So what happens then, right? What happens? I think people, when they built malls, usually would have been asking themselves this question. And so when I was on the private side, before you start a real estate development, one of the things you always ask yourself is, what's my exit strategy, right? If the use that I'm contemplating for this, for whatever reason, turns out to not be feasible, what else can I do here? And I think that's the question we need to really start asking ourselves about the built environment, right? If we build this, and then in 25 or 30 years, or even less than that, that use or that structure or whatever it is becomes obsolete, sort of what's the next use? Or how can we recycle those materials to do something else? I think we need to be asking ourselves those questions up front rather than at the back end as we're staring at, you know, these vacant buildings or something that's kind of falling apart, thinking, gee, what do we do now? What do we do with it? How about we start asking ourselves those questions in advance before we get there? And then there's some of these breakthroughs that we sound like we're just on the cusp of, right? So again, doing Google searches, finally paying attention to a lot more articles on what's going on this. There was just something in the New York Times in the last week or two that talked about something that's called Big M, little o, big S2. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But it seemed to have something to do with being able to take technology and flatten it. Right? And having all these sensors that could then be in like really, really, really thin stuff. And so my head starts going to stuff that may not even be possible because I don't really know how this stuff works. But is there a way that could we wrap a building in some kind of material like this? This is sensor heavy that automatically detects heating and cooling, right? So that we're being more conservative about how we're turning that thermostat up or down because the building already knows. Or is there something like that that we could do that would help support the structural integrity of a building that may be starting to be challenged, right? This is something we constantly deal with in Philly. This may not sound too old to those people from France, but in Philly, you know, we're getting up there. We're a 300-plus-year-old city. A lot of our built environment is 70, 80, 90, 100-plus years old, and structural integrity and how to do that efficiently, quickly, and effectively, and mostly cost effectively is something that we're really challenged with. So is there some effort that material science could help put behind that? And that would be very exciting for us. And lastly, I decided as I was sitting there, right, listening to everybody else and just sort of thinking about material science, I decided to throw something in that isn't necessarily air, water, land, all that stuff, right? Because we know that those things are really key. And climate change and resiliency is something we need to really, really focus on because that's our very near future. But unfortunately, in Philly, we are dealing with something that is happening today, and that is gun violence. And the material science answer to gun violence, I'm asking you please, is not material that provides for bulletproof backpacks. We need something else. I don't know what it is, right? But if there's anything that you can provide to this, if it's a kind of bullet that doesn't kill, if it's anything, I'm asking you to put your heads together and come up with something, because that is something that is affecting us. I don't know if you saw the paper today. Again, we're talking about very small children. We're talking, and it happened in every neighborhood in our city, right? It's not just the other neighborhoods. It was Rittenhouse Square. It's every area of our city, and we've got to have, you know, we want all these brilliant minds that may not even know they're brilliant minds to come to the table to help us deal with some of these issues we've talked about this morning, but we've got to let them grow up and develop those minds in order to get there. And so that's one of the issues that we really need to deal with all collectively together. And I know it's a little bit outside of the realm, but if anybody can help in any way, I'm going to make that request. So finally, I think material science can help us address problems we don't even yet know we have, right? So one of the big things we're also dealing with Philadelphia is asbestos and lead paint in our schools, right? Those were seen as cutting edge materials many decades ago, and no one had any idea about the harm that they would cause going forward. So, at the time, we didn't know they were problematic materials, and today we're dealing with those, but we need to know that in the future, we're gonna have materials that we invent today that we're not gonna regret using. And so we really ask you to be thoughtful about the materials that you come up with to make sure that in a few decades, we're not saying, oh my God, what were we thinking, right? So tomorrow we're gonna need material science to help us reverse the problems that we are unwillingly causing today. We're depending on you. We thank you for the incredible contributions you guys in your industry are already making to our city and the world every day. And thank you for having me and indulging me and letting me speak about something that I know about this much about. So appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We have time for some questions.
Yeah. Hi.
I have a question. How do you interact with the city of employees, the researchers, the engineers, besides the funds you mentioned, the startups? Is there a community or something?
Yeah. So I think.
So how do you connect researchers in Philadelphia to the city?
Right. So I have to say, and I would be remiss if I didn't, that I got a lot of support for this today from our Office of Sustainability and the director there, Christine Knapp, who interacts a lot with the different researchers in university systems. Also, Chris Pacholski, who you'll hear from this afternoon, who's with our Office of Transportation and Infrastructure Sustainability, is doing a lot of that. And I would say we enjoy a really good connection in our water department. Our water department is really doing a lot of things around cutting edge infrastructure. I should just mention that they were really charged with revamping our whole water system in Philadelphia by the EPA, right, the Federal Energy Protection Agency. And because, again, Philadelphia is an old city, so we have a combined sewer stormwater system. And they were charged with, we've got to really try to undo that. Well, to undo that in a city this old with that much extensive infrastructure is a really expensive proposition. And so our water department, thinking creatively with a lot of the experts, said, you know what, rather than trying to redo all our piping system and all that, we want to really think about some green infrastructure solutions. So more rainwater collection and natural swales and all of that kind of thing. And so our water department's really doing some cutting edge stuff there. But I think the way we do it, it's very collaborative. Because I was just talking to a gentleman before I started, which is, as government, and particularly in a city that's had a constrained budget, I would say, for a number of years and only is now starting to grow and getting some more resources in, you've got to leverage all the other things that you have. And so one of the key things is reaching out to, we have such a robust higher education and university system around Philadelphia, and that's really a huge asset. And anything we can do to sort of work together on that and leverage each other is really something we work towards.
This afternoon we'll hear from Howard Craig, who's the former commissioner of the water department.
Right. Yeah.
We'll hear a little bit about
That's right.
what Philadelphia is doing up there. He's now at Penn.
That's right.
Questions?
He learned everything he knew from city government.
Other questions for Anna? Gary?
So how did, I'm just thinking about the very first one, the reduction of the carbon footprint. So how did the city incentivize the individual city departments to make the change?
I think the key thing was that there's just a few, I would say, high-level objectives where, the mayor comes to the cabinet and says, these are some really key things I want to achieve. And the cabinet comes together and says, all right, it's up to us to really get the rest of our departments, agencies, whatever we oversee, to understand that this is a bottom line. It's not up for debate. This is something that we're going to do, and everybody just needs to buy in, and it's sort of that constant, to some extent, cheerleading, if you will. But you know, the directive to fleet management is if we're replacing vehicles, you're going to replace them like this. And I have to give a huge shout out to our Office of Sustainability and the green plan that they've come up with the city, and their attempts, honestly, to take, you know, which can be, no offense guys, but you know, science stuff can be hard for the average person to really grasp. And I think they put out an incredible green plan for Philadelphia about 5 or 6 years ago. But it was really hard for the average resident to relate to what does that mean for me in my life that I can do. And so in the last couple years, they put something out that was really geared toward the resident about simple things that you could do. Get a free rain barrel from the city, you know, reduce, come taste our tap water. I mean, that's one of the things we had set up in the City Hall courtyard, was what we called the water bar, right? And we sort of did a blind taste test with bottled water and the city's tap water, and people were stunned how often they felt that the tap water was better water. But it's just kind of simple things like that to get people out of their traditional mindset, but also kind of bringing stuff to the people to say, okay, you may not hold your own taste test at home, but that's something we can do, and in a high traffic area where it's really easy to just say, okay, I'll stop for a second and try a couple things, and oh my gosh. So I just think it's really figuring out how do you either reach people where they are, and then make sure you're reaching people at their level, and helping them take those first initial steps rather than saying you've got to get all the way to here right now.
Josh Sperling, I'm at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and we're excited to actually be able to work with the City of Philly and the City of Pittsburgh to do a new DOE grant. I just met with Emily Yates back in November, and she described this phenomenon of just almost a tale of two cities. The downtown core versus some pretty unequal distribution of services, infrastructure. And so I'm thinking along the lines of the first goal you mentioned of 100 or carbon neutral electricity grid by 2050, 80% by 2050. This seems very far out. And so one concept we've been working on at NREL is a idea of a district, a hub, a location where we can prove out these possibilities on faster timescales and include not just the UPenn intelligent campus approach or by the City Hall, but rather in an underserved part of the city. So what does it look like to have a 100% renewable electricity community that's an underserved, disadvantaged, marginalized neighborhood with increased nutritious food, improved access to jobs and services, improved water, wastewater maintenance. So curious as to your thoughts of as that sort of discussion starts to begin about district scale pilots and programs that can be replicated or scaled across the city.
So the question was about that there's some movement afoot to try to identify in certain areas a district, particularly in a lower served area of the city that may have lower incomes, lower service levels, and try to sort of combine a bunch of different things that could help raise that area in terms of, it sounds like, access to jobs, access to fresh foods, all of those kinds of things. So I will say, I don't know that we're necessarily focused on a specific area of the city around that. I'll be honest, I think that's a tricky political discussion about where would you start. And unfortunately, I think a lot of that political discourse may take a while and delay your ability to start. So I think there's a couple things going on, though, that the city is trying to approach more on a citywide scale, right? So one is the Rebuild Initiative, putting a bunch of more dollars into revitalizing our open space infrastructure And then also, we've got a lot of dollars that we're devoting to our trail systems. We're capping 95 with a park and those kinds of things as far as to ensure that everybody's got access to some kind of open space. I would also say that the water department efforts are citywide. And our biggest issue that we are working on as far as making sure that more of our communities take advantage of this is, again, figuring out the best way to get the word out and meet people where they are. Right, so if English is your second language, for example, or we're requiring you that you have to come down into the city in order to apply for something, those are things we're really looking at as to how do we do better outreach or make it easier for people to participate in the things that we offer. And I will just say this, one of the key things that I think is a big advantage to Philadelphia and that we often all ridicule is SEPTA. Right? We have an extensive transit system, right? And people typed them a line and my train was delayed, or I couldn't, or this or that, or and I really think that, again, is collective behavioral change about if we're really going to achieve our carbon emission goal, how do we get people out of their cars, right? Well, we all have to start supporting SEPTA. And saying that this is a real asset. So I was in Seattle not that long ago. They are spending a ridiculous amount of money to try to get a transit system that's 40 miles, right? We have over 400 miles of a transit system that we really have to figure out how do we fully support it, how do we get it to operate at maximum efficiency, and to get at that tale of two cities disparity issue, we also have to figure out how do we make sure that the fare system isn't flipped upside down, which is the way it is now, where if you have the most ability to pay, you pay the cheapest fare. Right? We've got to flip that around so that those with the least ability to pay the cheapest fare. And I think that's something that would really open a lot of doors to access to jobs and those kinds of things if it costs you almost nothing or $1 to get you to your job, and the buses ran based on where you really need to get to, as opposed to a legacy system the buses run that way because that's where they've run for the last 50 years. And that's something that Chris will talk about more this afternoon because that's really a focus. And how do we really get some of these things that are about the people to really be about the people? And so I think those are some efforts we're doing. And then I will say one last thing, which is we are trying to some extent, focus a little bit on the area around the North Philadelphia train station, because we feel like that's an area where we've got 6 or 7 different modes of transit coming together that just don't speak well together. And if you could, and really unlock that could really turn that lights on to not just in that community, but there's an Amtrak stop there that I think most people don't realize that, again, if we got that train running more regularly and made those transit nodes connect, 45 minutes to New York City. I mean, that's really could make a huge difference.
One comment following up Francine. I mean, we introduced about 450 outstanding undergraduate engineers. I'm looking at the back. I see Zach, for example, back there. Raise your hand, Zach. These kids are desperate for technologically relevant projects during their time at Penn. We're on the bench top moving atoms and molecules around. We're thinking 10, 20 years out. These students are shovel ready for working on technological problems that are probably closer to what could help the city of Philadelphia. So if we could bridge that gap.
Awesome. I'm at 1515 Arch Street, 13th floor. No, I mean, we would love to figure that. And I would say this, I mean, this is one of the things that we're looking at too, right? We did our Phila 2035 plan, and we finished all our 18 districts plans, and we realized, like so many things today, because things are moving so quickly, we're completely outdated. So we're trying to think about what does that 2050 plan look like, and we really understand that we need to do a lot of catching up as far as understanding how quickly technology is moving, where it's moving, and so we are thinking through how do we do kind of more engagement and embracing around having people educate us on where that's going, because we're not always as aware of it as we should be.
Last question?
Can I respond?
It's a response, I guess, not a question.
Well, I want to combine these two thoughts.
Okay, good.
I really like the trickiness of the politics of picking one location. And I was thinking back to Francine's example of the giant it's tied to a university campus industry. But I think this idea of students being ready to tackle the city's biggest problems coming from Denver, an approach we took to maybe avoid that challenge of one place gets all the benefits and not others. We actually have it's called the Mile High Net Zero Energy District Alliance or Network. And it's 4 or 5 different locations that have been identified similar to what you said, these 6 mobility modes that can be better connected. One's a new development with a headquarters in North America for Panasonic near a light rail station that we spoke about. Another's a low-income neighborhood that received a HUD grant right next to Xcel Energy and the Denver Water Utility. One's just a Denver Water campus, so it's how do you make it net zero energy. Colorado State University is launching a food-focused one called National Western Redevelopment. And I think there's a downtown with Rocky Mountain Institute with University of Colorado Denver students. So I think that maybe it's not picking one, but maybe there's 4 or 5 different types of locations that represent different types of challenges that could be explored or identified.
Yeah, and I would say to that too, I mean, it's always great to have outside pressure to move government.
So with that, let's thank Ann once again.
Thanks, guys.
Three comments, actually. Please don't leave any valuables outside by the coat rack. Keep your valuables in here or carry them with you better when we go to lunch downstairs. Number 2, we're going to have a photo. Misha, where would you like to set up?
Everybody walk down the second floor, and then there's going to be steps going down. So
Okay.
just don't walk down one level to the next set of steps.
Okay. And we'd like to have the speakers out in front, so if you see the speakers, please let them migrate to the front. And then finally, we'll be back in this room at 1:30